last couple months. I'll come back in November. Yeah, I'm not done. It's an interesting idea, to be honest, but he seems very excited about it. So
Okay.
had to make sure I do it. We'll see. Never get out of this.
All right, everyone, please find your seats if you can. This next panel is probably going to be the spiciest panel so far and for the day. Rumor has it that Haseeb does not believe DePIN is real. He's not paying attention. All right, please welcome our moderator for today's panel, Tommy Eastman from Plaintext Capital. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you. Next up, Haseeb Qureshi from Dragonfly. Thank you. Next up is going to be Abhay Kumar from Helium. Please give him a round of applause. And last but not least, Mahesh Ramakrishnan from Escape Velocity.
Thanks, Amanda. Oh, that felt loud. Yeah, it should be a good panel. Excited to have these guys on, hear their different perspectives. Let's kick it off with a round of intros. Haseeb?
So I am, whoa, sorry about that, guys. So I'm Haseeb, managing partner of Dragonfly. We're a global crypto investment firm, and we invest all across the stack from seed to Series B, Series C. Checks anywhere from $2 million to $30 million on the high side.
Hey everyone, I'm Abhay. I'm at Helium. I run the protocol, which basically means I do stuff on the engineering and protocol design and economic side of things. I guess I'm the only non-investor in this panel, so that's fun. You guys can just grill me, I guess.
That's what we're here for.
Hey guys, it's great to meet you. My name is Mahesh. I run an early stage venture firm called Escape Velocity, investing first check, really early stage. One of our core theses is DePIN, so have been super excited about watching the space grow over time and excited to debate the question today, I guess.
Awesome, thanks guys. I guess basically to start with the first question, DePIN is, I think, a really interesting sector of crypto, physically backed commodities, right? But some might argue it's perhaps been a little underwhelming in its performance. So my question is DePIN real? Is DePIN going to be successful? Are we just too early and there needs more time for this space to mature? Or maybe DePIN builders tackling things incorrectly and there's a larger issue there?
It's a very deep question, and you can think about it in multiple ways. The first way, of course, is that the total amount of revenue being generated by all of DePIN. So if you go to DePIN Ninja, which is made by EV3, it's like an aggregator of all of the DePIN networks that exist today. What you can see is that there's some that claim a bunch of revenue, but they're kind of being cutesy with how they're accounting for off-chain revenue, which is basically just, they have contracts in the real world with some company. But if you look at purely on-chain revenue, the numbers are really small, right? If you look at total revenue being generated in crypto, massive amounts of revenue being generated on, things like Pump.Fun or Hyperliquid or whatever, DePIN is tiny. DePIN is really small. So the other thing you can also look at is market caps. How big are the market caps of these DePIN networks? And the answer again is that, it's probably in the billions. I don't know what the exact total number is, probably less than 10 billion, more than 3 billion. But it's not huge, right? As a percentage of crypto is something like 3 trillion. 3 billion out of 3 trillion is basically a rounding error. So right now, absolute level, DePIN is really small. The deep question is, why is it really small? One answer to that question is that it's too early. and we haven't had the time to really build out the actual brick and mortar, step-by-step path to get there. I'm skeptical of that story because I've been told this DePIN story for many, many years now, right? I mean, for Helium's been existed for quite a while, and sort of, I'd be curious to hear from your end of the story why you think it's taken this long to really get to this inflection point. I think the reality is that DePINs are going to exist. DePINs clearly are self-sustaining, so like these DePINs are not so small that they can't continue to exist for a very, very long time. But one of the takeaways that I've had from the last decade of seeing DePIN try to figure out a way to get to scale is that maybe these businesses are just never going to be really, really big, but they can be self-sustaining, right? They can sort of be multi-$100 million networks and or even $1 billion networks, but there's probably not going to be $100 billion network DePINs. The capital efficiency, the difficulty of actually like generating the hardware or building the hardware and getting it distributed across the world, a lot of these things, it's just very physically constrained to get these DePIN networks to grow really quickly. Whereas the software networks, they're very, very cheap. They're very, very easy. There's no physical constraint in getting a software network to expand the entire world. To me, I think that's part of the lesson, but I'm curious what you think.
I don't think we're that far off of each other, to be honest. I always am troubled, I guess, when I see, the DePIN label slapped on a piece of hardware with a token. I'm not necessarily convinced that on its own means that you're going to be successful. Like, oh, cool, like here's a new way of like sort of aggregating capital, deploying it towards a particular problem, and then then what though? Like where are the users? I think I would say the last several months of Helium have shown me what you can actually do with a DePIN. What do we do on the subscriber side? We made it just completely remove crypto from it. That is what activated a significant number of subscribers to sign up for the Helium network. Right, that's what drove it. What do we do on the supplier side? We allowed you to bring your own device. You don't need to install a Helium hotspot. You can bring your Ubiquity, your Ruckus, whatever you already have in your venues. We aligned the actual coverage to the places where there was actual need, and those are the things that like it took some time to figure that out. So yeah, like is it too early? Probably, but I hope other DePINs kind of see the things that we've done and the sort of adjustments that we've made over the last several months and years. And like really, really, like number one, focus on the one thing that's actually driving that real flywheel that you have at the core, and actually believe in the flywheel. You can't just have the supply side. You can't just have the demand side. I think those are the things that I am convinced that DePIN can be real for probably a subset of things where this kind of deployment model is 10x or 100x better, right? It is true, it is an absolute fact that AT&T is not going to go to every single coffee shop down the street and get them to install a piece of hardware for them in the United States. And this might be different in a place like India, like where, a company like Jio hands you a Wi-Fi hotspot to put into your concrete building apartment because your cell phone service sucks. They just hand it to you for free. So like, it really is market driven. And so it really, understanding the context of what you're building, why it's 10x or 100x better, like that is how you can make DePIN real and how this new distribution model actually enables new networks.
Are there sacred cows that you feel like the marginal DePIN founder needs to just go and kill in order to become like Helium?
I think we went decentralized way too early on the governance side of the business. I think decentralizing the deployment is crucial. That's the whole point of this damn thing. Like otherwise, why bother, right? We're not going to install radios ourselves. We need this community to be aligned with the needs of the network. So that obviously should be decentralized. But we went very, very early on governance, on chain, and that slowed us down in a couple of places. And I think we could have moved probably a little faster there. So yeah.
How did you think through the separation between, the network and the protocol? Because, this is something that I think about with a lot of DePIN companies. I think Haseeb makes a lot of good points. Like, the space is really small. A lot of the companies, candidly, are going to end up mom and pop style shops where you get to like 25 to 50 million market cap. It's a good regional business, it's a good local business, but it might not be a great national business. In a lot of these cases, it's just a question of like if you're building an open protocol network or you have to build a closed company associated with that protocol network. And I'd actually argue one of the things Helium struggled with for a while was trying to understand, you know, how you sort of think through what the network is and revenue that accrues on chain versus, you know, what accrues at the protocol level, and, you know, whether you consider that real as a crypto investor. And that drives some of the phenomenon that Haseeb is talking about, where you just have these crazy reporting games that people play because, you know, you kind of claim whatever you want on the closed source side. I think one thing I'd love to ask you is, how did you guys think through the difference between the closed source network and the open source network? And then within that, where alignment lies? Because I think a question a lot of DePIN founders are talking about right now is like, how do we invest in these tokens if we don't know kind of what's behind them?
You did say you want to get grilled, so
I mean,
we're grilling you right now.
Well, you asked him a question, and he put a picture of like a frog shaking another frog's hand through his like pants. And I was like, I don't want to go that direction, so I figured maybe keep it learning.
I mean, I think, like to try to unpack the question that you asked, which is, you know, how do we get more transparency, right? Where is the alignment between, you know, token holder and equity holder? Like, these are all questions that a lot of crypto companies are thinking about. I think, you know, Morpho most recently, like, came out with something actually fairly new and always novel, at least for our industry. And I think that, like, the way that I think about this is that networks generate some kind of economic value, and there are multiple companies that are able to build and, you know, succeed because of that economic value that's being created. And so it is important for us to figure out, and I don't think we've solved this problem for what it's worth, we haven't, to figure out how to aggregate that total revenue that's being generated by this new deployment model, right? Helium, and I'll simplify it for a moment and just say, Helium is a way to deploy wireless networks at scale that has never been done before. What is the aggregate of all of the revenue that's being generated because of a network like that, because of that deployment model, right? And that's something that we're starting to do. We put this on world.helium.com a couple of weeks ago, started a couple of fights on the internet, is what it is. Kind of the point.
You're good at that.
What's that?
You're good at that.
I'm very good at that. But like, this is what we should be doing. We should not be counting like, here is the exact data credit burn that happened today on, you know, for this moment, but rather like, here's the total revenue that is in this ecosystem. Let's actually measure that. Like the thing that crypto markets lack, and, you know, I know other people are trying to figure this out too, is like true transparency. It would be great to have like a 10Q like system for all of the network, right? Some way, some checkpoint to, you know, allow a token investor to understand like fundamentally what's happening. And I think that this is something that I'd like to try to figure out, and like it's active conversation right now to try to figure this out. But, you know, aligning token holders with equity holders is a part of a larger story around, I think, ultimately transparency.
Speaking of token holders, I think DePIN's like an interesting conundrum, right? In that they've become really good at incentivizing supply of this commodity via tokens, but that sort of becomes a double-edged sword, right? As if demand isn't showing up and these tokens are still being inflated fast, I think it raises a lot of questions around the value accrual. For each of you guys, what are your biggest concerns around the current tokenomics of DePINs, and maybe what's a project that you've seen do a good job or a better job than the others in the DePIN space as far as kind of building their tokenomic structure?
I don't know that I can think of a great example in DePIN that has really nailed the token economics behind this. In a sense, like the entire theory of DePIN is a supply side theory, right? Like DePIN actually has nothing to do with demand. The whole idea of DePIN is that if we have a decentralized network where we give people ownership in the supply side, if we give tokens to the supply side, then we can bootstrap supply, and that's useful in some domain, right? This entire theory is predicated on the idea that demand will show up if enough supply is there. And over again, what we've seen is DePINs getting created in areas where they did not have a good theory of demand. They didn't have a good theory of where demand would come from. And of course, in crypto, because it's crypto, a lot of the demand is inorganic because they're looking for an airdrop too. And so you end up getting, I mean, one of the things that's fundamental to any startup, whether you're a network or a fucking SaaS company, every startup needs feedback. Feedback is the oxygen that startups live for. And if they do not get feedback, or if that feedback gets distorted, so they cannot rely on that feedback because there's farming, there's weird incentives, there's whatever manipulation going on, then startups die. 100% of the time, startups die. If they cannot gradient descent against the signal of what do consumers actually want, what do my suppliers want, what do my customers want, if they cannot respond to that signal and iterate against it, there's no reason for startups to exist. They exist so that they can do that learning cycle faster than big companies can. And so this is one of the struggles with DePIN, is that because the mechanism itself distorts both of those signals. It distorts the signal of, you know, where am I most efficiently going to be able to generate supply sustainably with an actual cost advantage? And second, where is real demand exist? If you have both of those signals getting corrupted, then whatever DePIN it is guaranteed to fail. So increasingly what I want to see from the next generation of DePIN startups is thinking more and more, how can I, like in the first generation of crypto period, not just DePIN, people were fixated with this concept of token economics. And the longer I've been doing this as a VC, the more I'm convinced that token economics is just terrible. Like in almost every single form of token economics is just bad. Because almost everything anyone ever describes as token economics is exactly this. It is corrupting the signal, basically corrupting the price signal they're supposed to be getting from either the supply side or the demand side. And almost every real big success story you've seen in crypto, token economics had absolutely no explanatory power for why they ended up becoming successful. So curious what you think of that story.
Go here first.
All right, curious what
Sure.
do you think of that story?
Happy to start. I think at a high level, a lot of the DePIN projects of the 2020 and 2021 era had a very simple model that followed what they'd seen over and over in crypto, which is start a network, distribute a token, use that incentive in order to get some form of user and monetize that user in some capacity. I think a lot of them misjudged the sales cycle and the complexity associated with like a physical hardware business, because there is governments that you have to deal with in a lot of cases. There is complexity associated with the feedback loops Haseeb is talking about. I disagree a little bit. I think that you do get some degree of feedback loops directly from your customers. One of the things that DePIN projects allow you to do, especially today, and you see projects like Hivemapper and Helium really taking advantage of this, is understanding which customers are performing and which aren't. So, easy example, AT&T actually can't tell you on a regional basis how much data is running through their towers. They do deals on a macro basis, on a state-by-state basis, whereby they're getting data on a weekly end-of-week basis in order to understand who's using data, where that data is being used, and why it's valuable. Helium can literally give you that on a second-by-second basis, and therefore give you like a far more consistent map of like how usage actually ends up accruing across a network. So there are very specific things that I think DePIN is very good at. One being an interaction with a user and a feedback cycle with a user that can be very well tuned to sort of create a resource. What they've struggled with is trying to take that resource pool that they've created on the supply side and monetize it on the demand side. And so what I'd say is I think the most powerful mechanism that DePIN has is its ability to turn the supply side that they've built into demand really quickly. Where have we seen that? Really experiments on the mapping side, experiments on the robotics side, but even they are, sub $10 million of revenue. I think one of the other important things that he mentioned is, this idea of token-based incentivization. At a fundamental level, if you have a business in its earliest days, its equity is actually worth a lot, and you don't want to be giving its equity away at scale without understanding where it's going to go. I think what a lot of these DePIN projects struggled with is they just wanted to look like everyone else in the space in order to raise capital. And one of the superpowers, I think, of DePIN as a space is it doesn't have to look like the rest of crypto. There were really interesting token-based mechanisms you can use in order to create things that look like real life. In real life, in traditional industries, you finance infrastructure using government debt or a combination of big business capital and big private equity capital. The ability to use financing instruments like securitization, the ability to use financing instruments whereby you're paying yield streams to certain people but not others, is a unique crypto superpower at the end of the day, and something that I think DePIN will allow networks to push within their networks to begin with in order to actually drive value from the users that they're dealing with.
Are there examples of folks who've been able to actually use debt to finance
Yeah,
these things?
Daylight has raised $85 million of a credit facility to build out solar panel deployments in Texas, Louisiana, and Alabama. Pretty much they're incentivizing the build-outs of solar farms in a number of regions, using those as a hub model to then incentivize regional folks nearby to put up individual solar panels. And then they're incentivizing people for their solar capacity. So they know exactly how much excess capacity they can have at any given time. They can sell it to the grid on a daily basis, and they can use it to sort of fill gaps that come from the grid in the meantime.
Mahesh, since you mentioned data, I'll share a quick thesis I have on DePIN and data. I just think with the premium that AI is putting on data, I think DePIN is well positioned to incentivize this, unique hardware and really edge node and leverage edge computing to capture data at the edge, organic data that brings value to AI. Do you guys think there's legs to that? Is DePIN uniquely positioned to capture kind of edge data and serve the AI industry?
So you've probably spent a lot more time looking at these startups than I do. I don't think any of them have really gotten to scale. One of the problems so I've seen a few pitches that are companies trying to do robotics data that they crowdsource from, people either egocentric data, meaning like someone wears like a GoPro and is like, makes eggs or just, folding laundry or whatever. And there's a lot of things that robots want to do. They want to be able to cook, they want to be able to fold laundry, do household tasks. And there's a shortage of this kind of data. And so there's a few startups now that I've talked to that are tackling the same kind of issues, which is, can we crowdsource from normal people being able to generate this kind of data? One of the big problems with DePINs generally, which I think is underappreciated until you actually get into the space, is DePINs have a lot of problem with fraud. And the more valuable a DePIN becomes, the more this cat and mouse game or this arms race really gets more and more severe. And so if you think about something like robotics, one of the things that I increasingly believe that a lot of these AI data generation plays are going to fall over if they really actually start working. Right now they're not working, but if they are working, it's actually really difficult to tell if somebody is generating data, is that data real? Or is that data being synthetically generated? One of the things we know about AI models is that if you train an AI model on its own output, it experiences what we call collapse. Collapse is basically when the errors multiply and it goes further and further out of distribution until it starts generating just complete nonsense, right? So literally you can do this yourself. If you feed the outputs of ChatGPT into itself over and over and over again, eventually it will start saying gibberish. Now it's harder to do that with ChatGPT because it's a very, very good product, but you take a smaller model and you just do this, just keep feeding its own output into itself, and eventually it'll just start saying gibberish. So this happens with every kind of model. And it certainly happens with robotics models or video data models. And so it's a lot cheaper. Like if let's say you have something that's generating video data. If I use your model to generate, if you're using a model to check whether this data is legitimate, I can use that model to generate data that your model will think is legitimate. And the only way you'll be able to tell is if you're a human checking that thing and see, oh, this looks like this looks like AI generated nonsense. But the AI can't tell. Right? It's sort of like, can you use an AI to tell whether another AI is hallucinating? By definition, no. Otherwise, it wouldn't hallucinate, right? Hallucinations wouldn't exist if the AI models could tell themselves that they're hallucinating. So the equivalent of this exists for every category of AI. And that's why anti-fraud is really hard. That's why people pay a lot of money to scale AI to generate clean data. Because they know that scale is clean, and they pay a lot of money to scale relative to like some random operator in some emerging economy, because they know scale has a very high standard of excellence, that this is clean data. Companies pay a lot of premium for this, and DePINs have a very hard problem self-policing this kind of thing if the prize money is there to generate fake data to pass some AI check. I think it's an intrinsic problem with a lot of these.
I think that's definitely the case, and it sort of speaks to that point that you guys made earlier around like the tokenomics models aren't necessarily new. Folks are sort of iterating on this standard, and we're one of these, right? A max supply, a halvening, like there's a lot more incentive at the earlier stages of networks. And you assume that because fiat price of those tokens are lower at the earlier stage, that it probably works itself out. But it doesn't always, it's not always the case, right? And so, yeah, like with this particular AI problem that you're mentioning, like we've had this issue with Mechanical Turk forever, right? The reason why let's say you have a Mechanical Turk job that you sort of deploy, you also do another Turk job to be its red team, right? And this is like very standard that you want to have multiple models. In this case, they're just humans, sort of dealing with this. So we'll have this issue with Scale AI at some point as well, I think, which is why the alternative to Scale will also succeed, most likely.
Yeah, no, for AI data, I think it's a use case that's like wildly experimental right now, and I think it's a hard one to back on the vectors of, like, it's just not what these models are looking for at the end of the day. I think what DePIN is really good for is out there sensor data that you wouldn't be able to collect otherwise, because at the end of the day, no one is set up in the way in order to collect it. So I'm thinking about things like GeoNet, HiveMapper, networks that are incentivizing people at like hundreds of people scale on a daily basis in order to do a very simple task. I think those kinds of projects are really cool experiments. Will they get to $100 million of scale? I actually am pretty skeptical, for what it's worth, but I think they're really interesting projects to get to the point whereby you're creating data that wouldn't be available otherwise. And in HiveMapper's case and GeoNet's case, $25 to $50 million businesses. Very possible on the revenue side. And that's why I think a lot of these DePIN businesses are going to be really, really good, like mom and pop scale, maybe a little bit scale internet native businesses.
Awesome. I guess we got time for one more question to put you guys on the spot a little bit. What might be something that could be incentivized with a DePIN network that you haven't seen yet that would be a good idea? Haseeb might say nothing, ever, but I'll give you guys a shot.
Nothing ever? Damn, that's cold. I'm not that bearish on DePIN. Look, I really want DePIN to work. Like, to be clear, I think any form of crypto coordination to build new things or to create valuable services is fucking awesome. And I'd love to see it happen. But intellectually, I've been watching the space for like a decade. My job as an investor at the end of the day, and this is the thing I tell everybody at Dragonfly, our job is to change our minds as quickly as possible. So when we see the world changing, when we see one of our theses being disproven, like, let go of it as fast as you can and try to adapt your mindset and your understanding to the new thing. I'm waiting for that day, but I don't know. I mean, you guys might have a better vantage point. I don't spend that much time with emerging, sort of pre-seed or seed stage founders as much as you do, Mahesh. What do you see?
I think the really interesting thing we see in DePIN right now is like an equity plus stablecoin incentive in order to get usage in a lot of different areas. So, I mean, the GeoNet model, they have $3 million of revenue almost. I think there's like 9 networks that are in the earlier stages of using the GeoNet type model to create sky mapping networks, to create all sorts of out there networks that incentivize observation-based data. So I think one of the things that we're really excited about is there's a number of companies out there that just incentivize this really long-tail data. And the experimental value of that in the early days is maybe a little bit unclear, but our hope is, as robotics use cases end up proliferating and some of these ideas end up going a bit further, that they end up having to integrate a fair degree more of world-based data.
I probably spend even less time with new founders than you guys
That's
do.
Good to hear. That's good to hear.
I spend most of my time building wireless networks, I guess. I mean, I think the thing that I've said this in the past, the thing that I'm hoping to see more is on the manufacturing side. Like, the hardware we build matters a lot. I also spent past life in biological sciences research and like the sort of ability to iterate very quickly on genomic data, small molecule data. Like, I think we actually now have the compute to be able to do some of the experiments that like I was really hoping to do 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But we don't actually have the production of this. And it would be freaking awesome. Like, if I was a researcher today, in the past, like, I would like put together a design for like a gene sequence, and I'd wait 24 to 48 hours for the FedEx file to show up. that appearing not just for genomic data, which is fairly easy if you can scale PCR, but like small molecule creation, very specialized reagents that you might need. Being able to do that in near real time in the areas around where these research facilities are, and being able to do this, having a research facility anywhere, I think would unlock biological sciences research by quite a bit, and I'd love to see a DePIN around that. And I've seen some early versions of this here and there, but nothing really there yet.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming on. Hope that was exciting for everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Pass it back to
Thank you.
Amanda.